Millions of school-aged children are diagnosed with alleged mental disorders such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. By talking out of turn, being distracted, not following directions, and fidgeting, a child can be labeled and subsequently drugged. The same subjective criteria are used to diagnose toddlers, who are then put on powerful mind-altering drugs, often before they are able to form a complete sentence. While the term medication is used in mental health system, the truth is that millions of children are simply being heavily drugged. One of the most common drugs used to treat ADHD is listed as a Schedule II controlled substance, in the same category as opium, morphine, heroin, methamphetamines, and cocaine. Parents are typically told that the drugs prescribed to treat their children are modern, safe, and effective, contradicting numerous studies and reports documenting their known dangers and side effects. Such side effects include stunted growth, weight loss, manic behavior, future drug dependence, heart palpitations, cardiac arrhythmia, anxiety, agitation, insomnia, bizarre dreams, suicidal thoughts, violent behavior, and even death. Long after the utmost tragedy has struck, more and more parents are left desperately gasping for answers. And one of the questions that continues to haunt them is, why wasn't I warned? This is the story of Daniel Ehrlich. 10-year-old Daniel Ehrlich from Pennsylvania liked to monkey around and climb trees, according to his father, Mr. Fred Ehrlich. In 1979, a school nurse diagnosed Daniel as hyperactive. His father thought his son was just acting like a regular kid, but the consensus of school personnel was that there was a serious problem with him. He was placed on a stimulant and a major tranquilizer. When his parents' health insurance ran out, the only help they could get was from a psychiatrist was a repeat prescription. 4 years later, Mr. Ehrlich read that behavioral problems could be caused by sugar in the wrong diet and saw the chance for Daniel to live drug-free and be returned to a normal life. He eliminated sugar from Daniel's diet. Within 2 weeks, Mr. Ehrlich saw a remarkable change. So he stopped getting the drug prescriptions and withdrew Daniel suddenly from the drug. 2 months later, Daniel, who was then 14 years old, hanged himself. Mr. Ehrlich wasn't warned that the suicide was a major complication of withdrawal from amphetamine-like drugs. This is the story of Raymond Perrone. 10-year-old Raymond was a bright, intelligent child who loved life and lived each moment to the fullest, according to his mother, Mrs. Linda Perrone. It took quite some cleverness to keep up with him, let alone keep ahead of him, she said. Being intellectual, able to quickly grasp things, and then having to wait for the rest of class to catch up, he felt bored with school. This led to poor performance in class, and in approximately February 1985, Raymond was diagnosed as hyperactive and prescribed stimulant drugs. 4 months later, on June 9th, during a housewarming party, Mrs. Perrone was sitting at a picnic table with a friend. My sister-in-law suddenly ran screaming into the backyard for someone to call an ambulance. I stood up in complete shock. She started screaming, Ray has hung himself. I remember running towards the garage to see what happened, but everyone was surrounding my son. They wouldn't let me go near him. When I finally saw him laying on the ground, I saw his face all purple, a sight that will remain in my memory forever. Raymond has been 2 days into withdrawal from the stimulant prescribed by a psychiatrist. His mother was never warned about the withdrawal side effects of the drug. This is the story about Samuel Grossman. Riding bicycles and horses was one of Sammy Grossman's favorite hobbies. He was also fast at jigsaw puzzles and had an uncanny sense of direction. Sammy was never wrong with his directions. For the first 8 years of his life, he was one of the healthiest members of his family of 6, rarely suffering any unusual childhood illnesses. But then he was put on a stimulant. He became forgetful about dressing himself, was constantly thirsty and lost weight, becoming pathologically thin, recalls his mother, Georgia Grossman. He began experiencing a racing and irregular heartbeat and collapsed in the school playground. The doctor told Miss Grossman, "Don't worry about this. This is only the stimulant." Shortly afterwards, Sammy collapsed again, falling off his bike along a roadside in Austin, Texas, and died at age 13. The autopsy revealed an enlarged heart, a consequence of the long-term use of stimulants, had contributed to the heart attack. Giving this drug to a child is like playing Russian roulette. No one knows which child will get the brain damage and or which child will die. "I played the game and I lost," said Mrs. Grossman. "If the cause of Sammy's death is made public and it can save other children, then maybe Sammy will not have died in vain." This is the story of Stephanie Hall. When Stephanie Hall was in first grade in Ohio, she was a quiet, shy girl who had a great love of books and school. However, her teacher said that Stephanie had a hard time staying on task and suggested the girl be tested for attention deficit disorder, or ADD. A doctor subsequently diagnosed this and prescribed her a stimulant. Over the next 5 years, she was increasingly complaining of stomach aches with nausea and displayed mood swings and bizarre behavior. On January 5, 1996, at age 11, Stephanie died in her sleep from cardiac arrhythmia. The coroner ruled the death to be of natural causes, but her parents disagree, blaming the drug. Mrs. Hall remembers that the last words exchanged with her daughter before she went to bed. "I said, 'It's 9 o'clock, Steph, get to bed.' And she replied, 'Okay, Mom, I love you.' The next morning when her dad went to wake her for school, she didn't respond. We called the paramedics and police," her mother recalls. "Stephanie was so cold. I kept saying to them, she's supposed to bury me, not bury her. No other family should know the agony of burying their child." This is the story of Matthew Smith. Matthew Smith liked riding his bike, playing softball, and had a particular passion for building forts. According to his father, Mr. Lawrence Smith, the trouble all started for Matthew in the first grade, when the school social worker kept calling us in for meetings, complaining that Matthew was fidgeting and easily distracted. They were told that Matthew had ADHD. She told my wife and I that if we wouldn't consider drugging our son, then we could be charged for neglecting his educational and emotional needs. After also being told that the stimulant was safe and effective and that it could help, the Smiths agreed to put Matthew on the medication. On March 21, 2000, while skateboarding, Matthew died suddenly from a heart attack. He was 14 years old. The coroner determined that Matthew's heart showed clear signs of small blood vessel damage caused by stimulant drugs like amphetamines, and concluded that he had died from long-term use of the prescribed stimulant. "If we hadn't have been pressured by the school system, Matthew would still be alive today," says Mrs. Smith. "I can't go back and change things for us at this point. However, I hope to God that my story and information will reach the hearts and minds of many families so that they can make an educated decision." This is the story of Shayna Dunkel. Shayna Dunkel from Pennsylvania was a little girl whose life was filled with dance classes, Girl Scouts, piano lessons, and softball games. However, in 1999, when Shayna was second grade, teachers believed she was too active and talked out of turn. Her mother, Mrs. Vicky Dunkel, was pressured by the school psychologist to have Shayna evaluated for ADHD. The psychologist referred Shayna to a psychiatrist who, after a 30-minute evaluation with no tests or physical exams, diagnosed her with ADHD and prescribed a psychiatric drug. Then later, 2 more. On February 26, 2001, the school nurse phoned Mrs. Dunkel to report that Shayna had suffered a slight seizure and fallen out of her seat. Mrs. Dunkel took her to the doctor, but while there, Shayna began convulsing. Her mother rushed to hold her in her arms, where minutes later she died. Shayna was 10 years old. As I held her in my arms, she looked into my eyes as her life ended, and I could do nothing to save her. If I had followed my heart instead of the advice of the professionals who thought they knew my daughter better than I did, my precious Shayna would be alive right now. This is the story of Adrian Wade. Adrian David Wade was born on November 9, 1991. My 12-year-old son committed suicide on October 23, 2004. He was on 60 milligrams of Strattera daily. He was on it less than 4 months, and his diagnoses were ADD, ODD, and bipolar. It is an SNRI in the same class of drugs as Effexor, which, to the best of my understanding, is the antidepressant category. However, Strattera is not classified as an antidepressant. If your child is already on Strattera, please watch them closely. I even thought this drug was so wonderful I had put my youngest child on it. 2 days later, my 12-year-old son was dead. My son's suicide came out of the blue. He didn't show any of the typical signs of depression at all. Get informed. It has been proven that antidepressants can cause children to have suicidal thoughts, and some children will follow through with their thoughts. Adrian will always be in our hearts. He will be greatly missed and loved by both his family and friends. This is the story of Leanne Bessner. This is my beautiful daughter, Leanne M. Bessner, age 15, who was prescribed Concerta about 2 months ago. She committed suicide on Sunday, October 9, 2005. She was a smart, beautiful, popular 15-year-old girl. We are a good middle-class family. We gave her much love and attention. We never missed a basketball or a baseball game, and we were always involved. Why did this happen to us? After talking with local parents whose children who had been on the medicine, I am finding severe suicidal tendencies and aggression. In fact, another classmate is taking the medicine and attempted suicide in the same manner 3 months ago, but with the grace of God, stopped and told an adult. Another parent found her daughter cutting herself on this medicine. I am just beginning to do my research and finding very disturbing facts about the medicine and the lack of medical follow-up for patients prescribed this drug. Doctors are simply giving this stuff out like candy. Parents need to be warned, and these medicines should be taken off the market. Please help our children and keep this tragedy from happening again. This is the story of Gabriel Myers. On April 16, 2009, 7-year-old Gabriel Myers apparently hung himself in the residence of his foster parents. In February and March 2009, Gabriel experienced a number of significant events in his life, including changes in foster homes, therapists, after-school programs, loss of privileges at home, and visitation arrangements with his mother. Gabe had been taking powerful psychotropic medications. Some of the drugs are not approved for use in children by the Food and Drug Administration. 3 of the drugs come with strong warnings that they can increase the risk of suicide in children. The 3 medications that were prescribed to Gabriel were Vyvanse, Lexapro, and Symbyax. Gabriel was prescribed the drug Symbyax, which comes with the strongest warning the FDA issues regarding potential for suicide in child. This is the story of Tyler Kowalczyk. Tyler Kowalczyk was 8 years old when he died suddenly without warning from pulmonary edema in his sleep Christmas night 2010. Tyler's dad was harassed daily by the schools to continue the medication that was started by his mother at 4 years old. When the drugs didn't work, he was given higher and higher doses. He was taking 30 milligrams extended release at 6 years old daily. He then switched to one of the many names for Ritalin. Tyler was only 23 pills into that medicine when he died. The medical examiner admitted to Tyler's father that his son did have an enlarged heart. However, the death was ruled as a natural death, even though pulmonary congestion was found in the autopsy. Tyler was never asthmatic, nor did he ever have an attack. Pulmonary congestion comes from heart failure, which was from more than 4 years of constant stimulant use. These deaths are just the tip of the iceberg. How many more? How many more children have lost their lives and their deaths were covered up to save a doctor or the pharmaceutical company's huge lawsuits? How many more children will have to die before we stop this? Thank you for watching my film. Never forget these children and their families, and help us spread this video and the information about these killer drugs.